Well, I'm really thrilled to be here, as you can imagine, and just to welcome you all. Obviously, I can't see you, but if we were having a preview, I hope you've got your drink, I hope you've got your salty snacks, and we're trying to have it in the spirit of a preview as much as possible. So what I'm going to do, as Malcolm says, I'm going to kind of walk you through the exhibition, talk a little bit about the work on the way. Yes, the themes that Malcolm has kind of mentioned already, you will see how these are expressed through the works. But I also want to talk about some of the other kind of connotations of this word legacy, because some of my collaborators have had a very influential impact on me and the work that I've developed, and so that their presence, I really want to kind of draw that out as well today. And the other things I want to kind of draw out is this kind of thing about photography and its relationships with kind of public and private archives, and these stories that can come forward in very unexpected ways and in different parts of Scotland. So behind me is a body of work called Beneath the Surface Hidden Place from 2007 to 2010, and it was a stills commission. And I'm going to start off and first of all just talk to you in a bit more detail about this image by myself and Jan McTaggart. And Jan is going to pop up in this exhibition at various points. So Jan, hello, I hope you're in the audience. And so this is really the first image from Beneath the Surface. It was working with her and her willing to go back to a place that she hadn't been to for years, at the place of her childhood that had been housing that had been demolished, and it was her working with her and returning to this location and her reaction to us working out what was the relationship with the landscape photograph and one of her family photographs that arrived at this idea of the digital montage, and therefore how it communicates to the collaborator who I'm working with in this particular project, but also then how it might speak to an audience that doesn't know about these experiences and doesn't know about these places. So I wanted to kind of you to be able to first of all see the first image that really triggered off the whole series of Beneath the Surface Hidden Place. So having done that work with Jan, was then able to kind of move the project into different parts of Scotland. So the next kind of group of images are from Ardler Dundee, and here you have Leslie's photograph of her sister on the slide with a multi-story in the background. And this project started at the point of when the last multi-story in Ardler Dundee was actually demolished. So there was a generation of people in their 30s who were aware that these places where people lived, yes, there may have been problems with them and all the rest of it, but there was a certain shift now in the identity of the place and the communities. So we'll move through these pictures here. So you got Leslie's pictures, and then another journey into a different part of Ardler Dundee with Leslie and Martin. Martin as a boy here, and then moving through with Mark. So what you're hopefully getting a sense of is that this is a group of 3 or 4 people. But there is this journey through Ardler, where yes, we're walking through, we're talking and looking at their pictures, but also I'm making these landscape pictures, and then when the two photographs come together, it's what do they mean, as I said before, to that collaborator, to that immediate community, but to another audience. And so I'm really delighted that we're able to bring this series to legacy and to street level, because of course street level's been very engaged with I'm thinking of the Red Road Flats and about these questions of what's disappearing from, say, the Glasgow skyline, and there's a resonance to some of these smaller places as what's disappeared from their skylines as well. So moving from Ardler Dundee, the next important area of Scotland, we're now moving to Dalmellington in East Ayrshire. And this was, now we're coming to another group of a group of 3, and very much a key person in me having contact with this group of 3, as they were a history group, was Elaine Mackey, and again I hope Elaine in Dalmellington is with us tonight because she was a very key person. And so it was going to Doon Valley Museum, having cups of tea, looking at photographs, looking at maps, and then going out to the site, but also with individuals who had a sense of their history, a sense of the heritage of their place, even if it was tied up with now disappearing and disappeared coal mining industries. But miners' cottages still being, obviously it's not always about demolition and disappearance, but it's about that changes of the community that's taking place, but also the importance of telling the stories, looking at pictures, but also with this particular group wanting to share their knowledge of the area, their sense of history, sense of the changing culture, but also wanting to be able to communicate that to another generation. So here we have, this was Drew, Anne, and Mary, who I worked with here in this area, and we're just moving towards the end of Beneath the Surface now. And we're coming to Mary Kennedy's picture here, and I'll just move across between two things. And this is a picture of Mary Kennedy's mother. Mary Kennedy is with me, and we appear to be in this forest, but it's actually a site of what, when we're having this discussion at Doon Valley Museum, a site of lost villages, the lost villages of East Ayrshire. And what I want to move to now is then this small grid of images here, and to talk about, just to kind of also say that I'm hoping the show will reveal some of the processes. So not only you want the images to speak to the audience, but to show the different kind of photography that's involved, the different kind of processes that are involved. Because, you know, lots of us have got these shared interests and about talking about how do we develop work in response to these themes, and also how do we work in collaboration in a meaningful way. So what we're looking at now is 9 images, and this is the journey to where Mary grew up as a girl, to one of the lost villages. In a way, it's a kind of contact sheet. It's a summary of a walk up to Leathen Hill, and you can see that it says "Long live the hill," and that was 1954. And this was really quite a significant experience about this thing about going out in a journey with the landscape with others who've got a different kind of knowledge, a different way of looking at the landscape, of which the outsider can't really grasp without that kind of exchange between being in the location, being with materials such as old maps, photographs, but it's also listening to what is being communicated to you at the time. So this was really this idea of the memory walk, which then becomes a reoccurring, should we say, method or activity that happens with the majority of my projects, is going out into a location with somebody who has a very special connection to it. And I wanted to kind of show you a bit more about this because this was particularly moving, is that to go to a place where the mining village has been moved on, it's been decanted, and what is left is the World War I memorial. And yes, the village whose sons were mourning is no longer there. So that gives you some kind of sense of the importance of what we might find in locations which may seem to be kind of remote or difficult to get to, depending on whose perspective you're looking at there. So what we're going to do now is set the scene for the beginning of the exhibition. We're going to move now right through and follow the flow around through and go to the next body of work I'd like to talk to you about, and also that this work has been, as Malcolm says, been kind of reimagined for street level space. So let's go up the ramp now, shall we? So what we're doing is we're moving round now to a project that I worked on from 2015 to 2016. And this is now we're moving to the to Kylaken in the Isle of Skye. And this was a project that was an Atlas Arts Commission. It was actually a collaboration with Kylaken Local History Society and also the Skye Localsh Archive itself. So there was a very important set of collaborations in order to make this project happen. And what's kind of instigated this project now we're talking about the role of the archives, is that it was a particular collection in the Skye Localsh archive called the Joan Wilcock collection, and it was over 400 slides. And you'll probably see here that this bit of this rolling slideshow. And also you might have sort of seen, for example, the boxes of slides that the archivist was kind of managing. And this is one of the things that was kind of very, in a way, quite profound experience for me, was listening to how the slides arrived at the archive, and the archivist spotting some familiar faces, but lots of contextual information didn't arrive with these slides. But you could tell that they were from Kylaken, and the Kylaken Local History Society had visited the archive a few times and kind of put names to faces and things like that. And so when I was asked to kind of do this project called Travelling the Archive, I wondered what would happen if you could actually take that archive from Portree in the Isle of Skye to Kylaken itself, and what kind of photographic response might come out of it, but also, yes, what other information might be retrieved. But it was also what was so interesting about this, and when I was eventually working closely with Kylaken Local History Society, that what Miss Joan Wilcock had done, who was a regular visitor to Kylaken, so she knew the people she photographed children, these are very striking images, is that looking back on it, it created a portrait of a community before the bridge was built, a community of fishing and ferrying, and there was a particular rhythm of the village that had changed. So that was really interesting to me, and was how to respond to this. So when you come to street level, you'll see some backlit images, which we'll go and look through at the moment. And these are images, they're a sequence of images. Again, it's a form of memory walk, and what you're seeing is it is a form of documentation of a projection event that was done in Kylaken, and these sites had the Joan Wilcock images projected into them, and they were part of a memory walk of which I was doing with a companion, such as Margaret or Caroline Clusen, who were some very instrumental collaborators here. So what we're looking at, now we're moving on to this section here, is that you can see there is an image of a church. You can see that there is four brothers standing on a step, and there's a pram at the side. And you can also see on one of the gable ends of the church another one of Miss Wilcock's pictures, which are this cluster of herring boats, but also the Castle Moyle, the kind of like landmark with Kylaken. And I'm hoping what happens when for those of you who can come to street level, you can experience the rolling slideshow, which I'm really pleased that the Skye Localsh Archive Centre has supported in it being here. Thanks to Catherine McPhee for that, so that you can kind of see what happens when you get a multitude of images. Okay, maybe not so much as what we're used to now, but a multitude of images. But also the challenge for when I was working with someone like Caroline and Margaret and the Kylaken History Society, who were all involved with what images were going to be used and why, and this challenge of editing, because every time you edit, and a participant did say to me they didn't like to edit because they felt like someone was being cut out of the history. So it's about, when you come to look at which images are rolling, that's a completely unedited archive. It's all of Miss Wilcock's pictures. And when you come to look at the series here, which we'll kind of walk through now, obviously there are specific images, and I'll speak a little bit about those as we go along. So if we move along from the Reed brothers, and this is also a very important thing about things about naming, is that within these images, these are children, it's still lived experience, and also the Kyleakin Local History Society and others will kind of be able to put names to faces, and obviously I met some of those people as well while working in Kyleakin in 2016. So here you have have a group of children again projected onto the church here, and if we move on to the next one here. So we're moving from the church, and you have to try and imagine that you're kind of walking around Kyleakin at night. And the reason for making these kind of backlights for street level was, yes, it was trying to evoke the idea of the slideshow, but also this light coming from elsewhere and illuminating those images. So that's why there's been have to be some thought about how to keep the spirit of the original site-specific work and how does it work in a gallery. So if we move on to the next one now, I'd just like to, this one here, I'd like to talk, this is Caroline. Caroline, happy birthday. And what you have here is that her portrait taken by Joan Wilcock is in the shop where Miss Wilcock would have bought her slide film. And so with this sort of back portrait here, and again, now what we're doing is that we're gradually walking, so you have to try and imagine that you're walking down, and then we're walking down to the slipway, which of course would have been, is part of the location where it would have been very busy in terms of when there was a ferry service going to and from like Kyleakin. So it's again what I'm hoping for here, and I'm just going to move over to the side here, is that when we look at these images where you've got the some of the details here which give you the clues to the kind of location. You've got the lobster pots, and then you're looking across, and there's two men with the newspapers who are doing newspaper deliveries on a Sunday when that wasn't, there were some people in Kyleakin, and this was told to me that there was supposed to be strict observance of Sunday kind of rules, and their dog in the boat. And then when you look across, and again, we started off with the castle oil, and you can see the reflection in the water. So it's trying to give that sense of the social history and the realities of that, but also making it into this other kind of photographic world, which hopefully viewers find compelling to look at and kind of be and make their own kind of thoughts and observations in response to what they're looking at. So that was a very, we'll move on to the next project, but before I do so, so the Travelling the Archive is going to come back again when I come to the end of the talk, because there was other things that we did that I'd like to kind of mention before I finish the tour. So we'll move on to now. We're moving on to now to a vitrine work, and this vitrine work represents a project called the Decorators, and this was the 2019 to March last year, and this was a residency by Art Walk Projects, commissioned by them. And the vitrine is what I'm hoping it will do. It will give viewers a sense of a journey from an encounter with someone else's personal photograph. So we've got Mary Fortuna's photograph here as the starting point. This was again a photograph I felt very kind of moved by, but also I was very interested in Mary's story, and there was a great rapport between us, and then how that evolved into a work for art walk projects, and eventually called the Decorators. So I'm hoping again that Mary's here so that she can see this. So what we have then is that you have this group. Sometimes what happens is the original photographer disappears from the narratives about these pictures, so that yes, you have this group of women and you have the man looking through the window, and I was really kind of drawn to this image, both from its kind of composition and aesthetics, but as well as this kind of warm, affectionate portrait that it creates. But it's also remembering that Mary is a decorator. She's about 17 when she's taking this picture, so that you have also this group of young women with this older woman. And so when I was beginning to think about the decorators and who the decorators are, is that they were a group of women who painted pottery, and then we're going to move on to kind of a section of the vitrine here. They not just thistles, but lots of mostly thistles onto pottery. And this is for the Buchan Potteries, who were based in Portobello in Edinburgh, and they moved in before they moved to Crieff in 1972. And I got really interested in this story about this kind of group of women who were working, and it's also the kind of creative, working creatively, but also the kind of friendships they had together. So what you can see here is that from one meeting, Mary led to meeting Irene and Barbara, and then their pictures start to populate a part of the landscape, which you'll see in a minute, which the potteries has been kind of removed from. And what was really fascinating me about their stories is the memory they had of this kind of painting the thistles. They also had their own signatures. So when you turn this pot over, you would see a sign, and it's a sign for an individual woman who's painted that pottery. And as well as this sort of kind of playfulness in the workplace, Christmas parties and so forth. So all this kind of history is brought to life here. So when we move to the set of memorabilia here, what we're moving to here now was showing how Mary's photograph then became, this is a kind of composite or a proposal, if you like, to art walk projects as we were developing the work. Because I was again thinking about how might you indicate that this women's history was here, and of course this is a living history, and so that's also the thing about that thing that's within living memory and so forth. So you can see here that the one kind of remnant that's left there's actually two, but one's kind of under restoration at the moment. But these two remaining kilns, but the rest of it is gone, and particularly the areas where the women work have all gone. So by putting this picture then physically into the location, coming in at sort of February, March time last year, then also what you have is these kind of wonderful things that can happen. And I'm very grateful to Susanna Ramsenthaler for taking this picture of the two women hearing about it and then coming up for one of the events. And obviously the project has sort of stopped at this point, as we got into the COVID-19. We were very lucky to have the residency at this point, and it stopped. And I'm really very pleased that we will resume that this year because of talking to more of the women and looking at their photographs and putting together a book. But for street level, it's trying to give that sense of what journey you can have from listening to somebody and their pictures, them taking you to the site and so forth, but also this other chain of friendships and relationships builds up from there. But it's then how do we put that as a kind of artist or a photographer? How do we kind of draw attention to that to the public who may have no knowledge or no idea of this kind of activity going on? So So that was kind of coming to the end of talking about this vitrine. And with this then, the idea of the voices, and this is why the booklet's going to become important. But when you're speaking to, say, for example, Irene, it's this kind of recall of the repetitive, but also the creative gestures, but then also what that meant later on in terms of their own creativity, because many of these women are still kind of very doing their own kind of artistic practice as well. So I was interested in finding out more about that too. So that gives you an idea of the vitrine. Now we're going to just kind of come across here to a series that I put together for street level called Sites of Personal Archaeology. And how are you doing there? Yeah. So here, this is where being asked to, and it's a kind of great privilege to be given an exhibition and to be asked to kind of look back on some of your work and to kind of sort of reflect on it, and again going back to those early points of what still lives with me, what experiences still live with me, and sites of personal archaeology, although the images range from 2005 to 2007, obviously with the exception of this image here, this notion of archaeology has been really important. So this here, and there will be some great friends, hopefully tuning in tonight as well, who were also connected to this experience, as where I was a volunteer on a community archaeology project. So now we're in East Lothian, Preston Grange Industrial Museum. And what was important about this experience was watching how, and learning how to do this, but about a kind of archaeological investigation. And this was an industrial archaeology investigation. But if you just kind of can remember that picture of John Yeoman and his brother, and there were some key details of the kind of washing hanging hanging behind them, and so that someone like John came along with his picture while this archaeological project was going on, and that was predated Beneath the Surface Hidden Place. But I was really again quite very moved by that kind of observing that of somebody looking at a place that was once where kind of 55 families lived in mining cottages, and here we were now unearthing some of their foundations. And then, of course, with archaeology in this context, there is yes, you do the uncovering, you do the documentation, you do the recording, and then you do what's called the backfilling. And so then again, that process of it is there, but it also disappears from visual view, but maybe it's kind of like holds in the memory in some way. So this idea of kind of the archaeology and that kind of particular archaeology, but now bringing in the personal archaeology, is that coming back to Jan, and now we're coming back to Foxbar Paisley, is that again we went back to the place where she lived, and there would be these remnants, and so for her and her presence, that meant that there was another kind of archaeology that was going on there with these remnants, a sort of personal archaeology, not digging into the ground and not in an invasive way, but that sense of piecing a former home together in relation to what that means to that particular individual, but also in relation to their photographs. So, and again, when we're going back into when kind of buildings are kind of demolished, is again that's another. Well, I mentioned earlier about that another sign, a sign where people recognise that this is an end of an era, moving to a different era, a different set of identities. And so again, that kind of when Mark walking around Ardler at that point, so there's a sense that yes, you've got the debris of a demolition, which is also kinds of a kind of personal response to that, and raises kind of interesting questions about archaeology. So what we've come now to now is now we're kind of moving from East Lothian, and now we're going up to Helmsdale in Sutherland. So many of you will know, or know that through driving through Helmsdale, maybe to go up and get the ferry to Orkney. And now we're moving to a project called Ghosting the Castle, which happened in Helmsdale. Really interesting community. Also, this was with working with Timespan, and Timespan. And working with Timespan Heritage Group, and that was really interesting because their archive is very much tied to the people who've lived there, and that sense of the kind of cross-generational memory, from fishing and clearing and so forth. So a very strong kind of sense of its connection to history, to its local history, but the significance of that. So when I was working. Asked to work in Timespan at Helmsdale. So again, what happened again, there was a conversation that happened quite quickly within the archive. And again, the archivist was very important in relation to the discussion with the group as well. And it's about the demolition of Helmsdale Castle and the necessary, it had, about it being demolished to make way for the A9 bridge. But the significance of that, that kind of demolition was also really interesting in terms of the different kinds of photographs that came out from the archive, but also the National Archives that are held in Edinburgh. But within Timespan, you could see that, if we go through this detail here, that again, going back to that kind of local landmark of Castle Moyle, now we've got the local landmark of Helmsdale Castle, which has kind of had to be removed, and we'll come on to the reasons why for that as well. So it's very interesting for me to see that this, this kind of ruined castle keep cropping up in the background of yes, here I am on a day out, and sometimes it was definitely kind of a tourist that had come and visited. But then there were also photographs that were taken where people were very kind of close, had close family connections. So what you're looking at here is a plan, or originally a plan from 1967 with different options of the roads that would come through Helmsdale. And there were some very interesting discussions here in terms of change, but also about transportation, because there was significant damage that was being done to the older bridge, but also there was significant coastal erosion that was happening, and the castle was becoming more and more precarious anyway. But there became interesting kind of dialogues about heritage, for example. So that if we look across here, and this is where John Ross Paulson, and I'm very grateful to Margaret and Timespan in allowing me to kind of to work with these with his images, because he chronicled the demolition of Helmsdale Castle, but also he photographed it at various points, so that if we kind of follow this kind of line through here, so we're also being joined by another community member, David Cowie, who had a very particular way of looking at the landscape from his kind of engineering viewpoint. So that when I was in Helmsdale, I was trying to visualize the castle in relation to what was there now. So you have this embankment there. So it's a way of working with a part of John Ross Paulson's picture, but in response to David Cowie walking me around and looking much more as from an engineering or civil engineering kind of viewpoint, and sort of saying, well, no, the landmass, it was this high, and we also checked it with the archives. And so that although you have all these factual information, it's then what happens when something comes together visually, and again, how does that communicate to another generation who has no memory of the castle themselves, as well as those who do have some memory, and there were different kind of points of view about what would be done now, how would it have been recorded differently. So it had quite a precarious kind of, it wasn't recorded in the same way that we might record a historic building now. So those conversations were really interesting. The other photographs that you would see surrounding the map are the photographs that kind of point to other aspects of not only the Helmsdale and Timespan archive, but also the aerial views, which sometimes show the castle, and then it will show its kind of the construction, the reconstruction that was going on around its coastline. Again, very much kind of interesting how resonant it was to do, those kind of environmental pressures and sustainability, things that we, that we kind of, that we're still kind of, struggling and talking about now. So what we're going to do now is move through to the last piece of work to talk to you about. So we'll just kind of move around here. Anyway, so that's so what we've moved now around is to the last series to talk to you about, and this is a heritage site. This is a work from 2014 to 2016, and again reimagined for street level, and we will kind of talk through this work. But before I do that, what we're doing now then, we've moved from Helmsdale, Sutherland, and now we've moved to West Calder and West Lothian. And what is bringing me here and bringing you here now is we've got the Calder History Group, and also we've got a particular photograph of a house called Westwood House. And hopefully you can just sort of see that detail coming up now. So as you can see, that this is a kind of an Edwardian postcard, and this postcard being brought along to we were doing a kind of memory mapping session, and Dave Rennie put this postcard down as part of his postcard collection and began to tell me a story about this house. And the house, he said, here was Westwood House. Had a particular history with someone called Captain Stewart, but also he then said that house is buried in the Five Sisters Bings. So what you're looking at now, we're moving on to the sort of the question of the Five Sisters Bings and this story. Before we go before we hear a bit about that story. So the Five Sisters. Some of this will be very familiar to some people. So the Five Sisters are essentially, are industrial spoil heaps from the shale mining industry, which of course went in the early 1960s. It's also a landmark which has had this kind of different kinds of histories and viewpoints on it. So at one stage, Bings being always thought of as eyesores. Then in 1975, 1976, an artist called Joan Latham declares this as a work of art. Again, some of the people, hopefully some of the people there who've been investigating the artist placement group will, that's got a particular resonance, and also that's got a resonance with Glasgow School of Art. Later on, they become scheduled monuments in the 1990s. So it has these kind of layers of history that and a kind of different kind of status levels as well. So, but the reason when you come to look at, and if we look through now to what's at street level, if you look at a 1950 aerial photograph, we see that they are not yet the Five Sisters. They are not a dormant, landscape or remnants of a industry that's long gone. They're in the process of becoming the Five Sisters. And then what the story is that is going to come up now with a little extract is that when Davey put the postcard down, he's saying this house is buried in the Bings. It wasn't demolished. And also, we know someone who lived in the house, very much a kind of treasured community member called Isabella Mason Kirk. So that's so therefore her story, and eventually I managed to get to meet her and interview her with also the Calder History Group, and so hopefully her story is coming up now. Yeah. So sorry about the creaky boards here. It's not.
Well, here you are to ask me about my time living in Westwood House. Well, I remember it very well, actually, because there were so many interesting things that I liked about it. And one was the garden, where the old-fashioned flowers and the roses hanging. You could smell them for miles. And beautiful rhododendrons of every hue would come from countries abroad, wouldn't they? Been there for hundreds of years, probably. And the lake at the front. And the owls, I liked the owls on the trees and listened to them at night. And many's the time I've seen the wee ones that fell out the nest and that.
So what you hopefully you've heard, and obviously we have some kind of live feed kind of negotiation challenges going on as well. So you will have heard Bella telling her story. So this begins to, when we're talking about shifting photographic grounds, is that you're thinking back to that postcard of the house of a kind of, of a Captain Stewart, to then thinking of, when the viewer comes into street level and walks through this sequence of pictures and hearing Bella's story, and what's built up then is that the house then becomes populated and the Five Sisters becomes populated. This is a story of 12 families all connected to the mining industry. But also, as we kind of move towards the last few pictures to talk about, it's also a space of a girl growing up, of also remembering other families, the gypsy travellers that came through, all the things that are kind of covered over now by the Five Sisters. But it's also the space of her imagination, and she talks vividly about the love of books, the love of art, and her imagination. And so you can see that what happened here with the collaboration with various Glasgow School of Art colleagues, and this was a New Media Scotland Alt W commission. So again, it's looking at how we kind of interpret landscape now using point cloud and digital animation, and that idea of something between an architectural model and a doll's house, but also about an imaginative space of, yes, the storyteller who's recounting her memories and experience, but also then how it becomes a kind of imaginative place for us. This is my aspiration, of course, to kind of be in the position of that girl. So we're shifting through this different kinds of modes of photographic language, if you like, and so I'm that was a very important experience. And she's the one sound voice that you will hear in the gallery, and it's very. So her kind of voice, the quality, that kind of way, she is a storyteller herself. It's really important for the audience to hear. And thanks very much to her family for all the support, supporting Bella at that time and afterwards. So I'm going to finish up now with the final vitrine, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of things, three things in this. And so what we're talking about, sort of legacy and a retrospective, and here's just where you have a combination of bookworks, essays, but also photographs belonging to other people that have been significant and remain significant to me. So here we have, this is from 2001, a book called Tracing Echoes, and I've included this because this was my kind of first self-initiated residency at the house of Julia Margaret Cameron on the Isle of Wight. That was my space of teenage play. We've talked about a few kind of childhood teenage play spaces here, and how that evolved, and was interested in a group of photographs of her maids and of young children. And it was all sparked off by an encounter with a photograph of hers that had an uncanny resemblance to my sister. So Vanessa, I hope you're here. Hello, Vanessa. And I wanted to kind of include this because this is, you know, there's a sense of the kind of islandness of here. And then later on, when I got to go to the Isle of Skye, obviously it's a completely different kind of island. But we're moving again sort of from the different with John's picture of the bridge under construction, the Travelling the Archive booklet, which was a piece of, you know, it was a book that was put together collaboratively, and Caroline Margaret very instrumental in helping me to kind of also shape and edit this book. So the way that you've got Joan Wilcox's pictures in this book, but also a narrative about the village and how it's changed, and trying to take the contemporary reader through that. And then kind of finally really to talk about, just to flag up here, because what I wanted to say is that this essay here, this photo essay here, is about a project that never happened in response to a miners' social club. And I'm going to be really delighted to open up some of these conversations in the events. And one of them will be We Are Social History, with somebody who's very much made of a successful project in response to these social spaces. So we're coming up to the end point now, and there's a bit of a future pointer of next projects that I've been thinking about for a while, with Milton Rogavant's portraits of Scottish miners and their families. And I hope what I've done is given you a sense of the show, and also for those of you who are able to say, I hope you'll have your own encounter with the work, and also there'll be many of you that would like to come but can't come, but you know, this is just one way of showing you what's here, and it's been particularly important to be able to show those previous collaborators what why those projects are important to have here, and how they've been represented in the street level gallery. But we'll continue on some of these conversations. Looking forward to talking to Annabella Polan on the 20th of May, and then we'll have our last session, seminar session, where I'm opening up the conversation to 4 special contributors to me, and that will be on the 5th of June. But we haven't opened yet, so anyway, I hope that's given you a taster.